So in this video, what I'd like to do is demonstrate how I combine some technologies to produce what I hope are very, very beautiful pieces of art, jewelry. I'm doing a process called Champleve, and it's an enameling, a glass enameling process where you fire glass enamels into recesses or cells that have been carved or cut into metal. It's a very, very ancient technique and can be quite beautiful. Now, of course, you can make this using a variety of tools, make these pieces, and typically you would engrave or use a burr or something to carve out your design in the metal. But of course, since I have this beautiful F1 laser, the Ultra, I'm going to use it to carve the designs. And one of the creative values of this machine is that you can really expand your portfolio of imaging, and so the cutting of the design into the metal is no longer a limitation, and you can do very, very detailed designs or fairly straightforward ones like I'm going to show you today. I've done a variety of these, and here's 4 of them. 3 of them are in silver and 1 is in copper. So don't feel like you have to use silver. Copper works just as well in some ways. And you'd use exactly the same techniques for all of them with very minor variations. So with that, we'll get on to how I make these pieces. You can purchase blanks. You can use copper. I'm going to use fine silver, and I buy it in ingots, 1 ounce ingots, and then I roll it to the thickness that I desire. And again, for this one, you're going to want a thickness of at least 1 millimeter, preferably closer to 1.5 millimeters. So that's going to be what we're going to aim for here. So we just progressively roll this through. And fine silver is softer than sterling, but it still is a fairly robust metal. I will be annealing this in just a moment. I just like to get it started. So now I'm going to go anneal it, which means just I'm going to heat it up and then cool it. Now, of course, you can cut your blanks with a saw or punch them out in a disc cutter. But because I've got a press and I really incorporate this a great deal into my studio work, I'm going to use a die. This is basically a machined steel form that will allow me to punch something that looks like that, the tag for the pendant. So to do that, we have to lower this. I'll put a piece of silver, in this case, it could be any metal really, on top of the design. And then I'm going to place a matching machined piece that's going to cut that shape. Okay, these are very tightly machined, and they work very nicely for the purpose. Okay, so we'll put a spacer on there, line it up, and we'll press it. And if we did it correctly, I should have a nice silver shape. There's the negative that was punched out. And here's my 1.2 millimeter silver disc. Alrighty, I think that's pretty good. Here, select the grouped vector and bitmap. I'm going to select the bitmap and I'm going to turn off the output for a moment, because what I want to do here is with this I'm going to score the outline, and I want to do that about 30 times. So since 10 is the maximum passes for this process, I'm just going to repeat it 3 times. Okay, so we'll just go to process, and each one will take 1 second, so that should be pretty easy. Let me start it. Space now, and I've framed it. More or less looks pretty good. Let me refresh the image. So you can see that the camera is just a little offset, but I'm not going to worry about that. We're just going to go ahead and do this one and see how it looks. Okay, so typically fine silver doesn't oxidize very easily, and when you use a torch on it, it doesn't oxidize hardly at all, but it does some. And when you use the laser, it's going to put a dark oxide coating on there. It's probably partially an oxide, and also sulfur and other contaminants that are in the atmosphere will form a complex on the metal. So before you enamel it, I like to clean it, and the first step in cleaning is to put it in a bath of hot weak acid, which is called Pickle. So I'm just going to drop that in there, and we're going to leave that in there for about 5-10 minutes, and then we'll go on to the next step, which will be a mechanical polishing. The palette of enamel that I'll use for this one are going to be 2 different blues and an opaque black. I'm choosing transparent here because they'll be filling large areas and the fine silver reacts well with those transparents. I discovered with smaller areas it's better to use opaque. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to mix these glass enamels with water. You can just use plain water. I use a little bit of acrylic base that's diluted with a great deal of water. It just stiffens it a little bit, but you don't really need that. I'll put a little wash water in one of the wells of my palette, and then I'm just going to load just a little bit of each of the powdered glasses. Put those over there. Alrighty, then we'll just add a little bit of our liquid, or water, to each of these and stir them up just to wet all the grains in a medium, but they are suspended in the medium, and that's very different than using paint. So you need to keep that in mind if you weren't aware of that. Okay, now we'll just use, I just use toothpicks to stir these things up. Again, what I want to do is simply make sure that I've wet all the grains already. So there we have it. That's the palette I'm going to be using for this particular project. Now the major tools that I use to do this are simply a small paintbrush and a needle that I've placed in a holder, and be sure you have some toilet paper hanging around to wipe things. Turns out with enamels, since water is the carrier, toilet paper is a very, very good absorbent thing to use. So what we're going to do here is simply now choose to load enamels into the recesses. So I'm going to start with some black, and I'll pick some up on my brush. Then I'll use surface tension to hold it. There's a lot of water in that black, so okay, there's some black on the body. Alrighty, now there's a bunch of different things you could do, but I think what I will try to do here is, let me see if I can get just a couple of glass grains into these eyes. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to put some dark at the wingtip. And I'll do that vein. Let's do that just for interest, coming off the body. Alrighty, so I think I'm done with the black that I want to use right now. So what I'll do now is rinse my brush and my needle and my wash water. And what I'm going to do is start with the darker blue and move at the edges of the wings and move toward the center, and then I'll fill it in with the lighter blue and try to mix them up a little bit. Okay, well, for the time being, I'm going to call that good with the dark blue. So we'll rinse. And next I'll try to blend the light blue. Okay, I think I might put just a little more black on the body to make sure that that's dense enough. Okay, now let this dry completely. Don't get anxious and try to put it to the torch too quickly. If it has any moisture whatsoever, it will bubble and it'll blow out grains of glass, and it'll look like crap. And you can always refire it, as well as you oftentimes repeat this process 2, 3, even more times to layer glass on top. I'm hoping that I put enough glass in that, frankly, for this design, I'd like to get away with just one thin layer, rather than make it bounded and need to sand it down too much. So anyway, we're just going to let this dry, and then we'll fire it. Well, this piece has been drying for about 45 minutes to an hour, but I'm still going to approach it cautiously because I've packed a fair amount of glass particles in there. So what I'll do is start my torch, give it a fairly bushy flame, not a super hot one, and I'll start way down below. And I'll just be sure that I warm this. I'll warm this area. You also have to be careful when you do this of, you might have noticed there's a little bit of an oxidized metal like steel from this mesh that popped off. And it can land in the middle of your glass and make a mess. So you need to be very cautious. So I'm just going to be gently flaming this for a moment. Now, one of the things I've seen folks do with torch firing that can be a problem is under firing. Well, it's possible to under fire and over fire. So what we're going to want to do is heat this until the enamel looks perfectly smooth, and it'll be very dark. The colors will not appear or reappear until it cools once more. So now I'm going to pay attention, and I'm going to start heating it more drastically. Bubbling, which I don't care for. It's probably the acrylic. Yeah, but it's all settling down nicely. And with cooling, be patient. Don't try to rush it. If you put this into water to quench it, if you hear it sizzle, it's way too hot, because you'll watch this cool and the colors will reappear. Now, after it does get warm, I'll put it in water, but I'll wait a few minutes to do that. Now, here it is cooled, and it's quite attractive. I might have overdone the dark blue a little bit, but it's very nice. So our next steps are going to be I'm going to first take a metal, like a diamond tip, and I'm going to grind away just a little bit of the black here where I think it got onto the silver where I don't want it. And then I'm going to use diamond paper and just give this a brush. Now, if I were doing multiple layers of glass, or if the glass was standing proud, this is even more critical of a step. You need to either take a stone called a Scotch stone, it's just abrasive, and use it in water to grind the glass down. Or I tend to use these like diamond sandpapers. They're flexible, and I just make sure that I've sanded this a little bit. And although it's not essential for this one because the enamel is below the surface largely, I found that it's not uncommon to have a couple of little microscopic bits of glass that escape or pop off and fuse to the silver in the background where you don't want it. So it's just a good practice to always stone or sand your piece. And if you don't like the look of the glass and you want it to be more shiny, what you do is refire it. And if you refire it, it will gloss over again. And then this is just a very fine silicon carbide paper that I'm using, or sanding sponge. And I'll do the back too, just to let it match. Okay, that actually is going to be very nice. I think what I'm going to be doing with this piece, just to try it, is to put a bale. I'm going to put a bale on here, a sterling silver bale, and then we're going to oxidize it and see if we can't bring out a little more of the contrast of this beautiful blue coloration. But just a few parting words with this. I want to be clear that this is not necessarily a complete how-to do it video. I aim to inspire. I hope I inspire you to try to stretch your skill sets and learn new things. Um, but clearly, people who are enamelists, that's a skill set that is developed over decades, sometimes many decades. It involves a great deal of science and engineering, as well as art and creativity. So don't feel like you're falling short if you don't get it the first time, or have difficulty with this material. But I think what you want to do, or you can easily try, is don't spend thousands of dollars initially. Just spend a couple of dollars if you want to try this, and purchase the minimum materials. A few really nice quality colors of enamel, your torch, and a way to fire things, and give it a try. So and one of my mottos is and remains, never be afraid to suck. And what I mean by that is that I tend to show people, obviously, the pieces that I'm proud of, or that I think are instructive, or that are pretty. What you don't see are the many, many examples of learning experiences that I produce that wind up either feeding my crucible because they are going to be scrapped, or go into a bin of giveaway material. So it's all about learning and stretching your skills, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.